Hey, nice to meet you. I'm Anna. I'll be talking about kind of the data piece of AI today, going into what user-owned AI is, and then also Vana's role in kind of building it out. Quick intro on me. I first got into crypto through mining, so I was really interested in currency. I had a picture of Janet Yellen in my high school bedroom, so I was just very interested. Worked at the Fed in high school. Got to MIT, learned about decentralized currencies, and started mining ETH in like 2015. Got obsessed with kind of decentralization, and then started doing some research at CSAIL, which is MIT's AI lab, back in 2017. That brought me down the AI rabbit hole, and just kind of saw like the only thing that matters for AI models to get better and better is data. Great. So first, I wanted to start with actually some definitions. So I think a lot of people are familiar with centralized AI, which is what you see with like ChatGPT, OpenAI, Claude. That is when you have model weights that you keep private and are owned by one company. And what's good about it is because it's monetizable. And so actually, maybe to take a step back, how many people have like run an AI model locally on their machine? OK, cool. How many people have trained an AI model? OK, nice. So like actually fairly, yeah. OK, I'll go quickly through this then. So yeah, one of the big problems with centralized AI is that it's not controlled by many, which means that you can't have as many contributions from the community, right? So that ends up seeing like, OK, you might run out of data, which is what we face today. Then you have an alternative, which is open source AI. Open source AI is good because it's controlled by many, so many people can contribute to it. But it's hard because it's not monetizable. And AI models are very expensive to train, right? They can cost $10 to $100 million today to train. And I think it's going to go upwards of $1 billion, right? And I think like 2 years ago or so, we saw a lot of investment go into open source AI. And then there was a lot of trouble actually monetizing that, right? So we ended up in this situation where open source AI as a business model is kind of broken. So with user-owned AI, you kind of get the best of both worlds. So the models are monetizable, but also controlled by many. And the key to make this work is that you have to be able to keep the data or the model weights private to own something, right? It's very hard to charge someone money for something that is publicly available on the internet. And so that privacy piece is really the key to make it work. Foundation models, which are just a term for like the really large base AI models like Llama 3, are really becoming a source of truth and economic power. So whoever controls AI can kind of decide truth in an AI native world. I think one example I like is, if people remember when Google put out Bard, and then if you asked it for a historically accurate depiction of a medieval British king, it would show you like an Indian woman, and sort of like, I think that this was really easy for people to laugh at, of like, hey, this is this crazy wokeness of 2024. But if there wasn't another source, like Google or whatever, this would just become true, right? Like there would be no way to otherwise know. And then it's also really the source of economic power, right? So $3.4 billion in revenue is going to OpenAI for models largely trained on other people's data. And ultimately, AI models are only as good as their training data, right? And so this is some of the GPT-3 training data broken down. Most of it comes from Common Crawl, which is the data set if you just like send a bot onto the internet and like scrape everything it can find. So everything that's publicly available. Publicly available means it's indexed by Google. You can see it there. If you need to log into a website to access it, then that's not public data. That's private data. And that data actually represents most of the internet. So people estimate that less than 0.1% of the internet is publicly scrapable. So this public data is only a small amount of the data. What AI researchers are running into today is called the data wall. So the data wall refers to the fact that we're actually running out of data, at least public data, to train AI models on. So GPT-3, like, OK, we want to make it better. Let's train it on more data. Kind of keep scaling it up till you get to Llama 3. That's trained on 15 trillion words. Tokens, just like the AI word for a word, not a crypto token. Llama 3 trained on 15 trillion words. And that's pretty much the whole public internet, right? So we're trying to make AI smarter and smarter. We're giving it more and more data. But now we don't have any more data for it, at least not on the public internet. So to overcome this, companies that have access to private data have realized, hey, my data is super valuable for AI training. I can charge a lot of money for it, right? So like Reddit's earning $200 million from selling data. PhotoBucket is earning like $1 to $2 an image. Apple's buying data for $50 million. Basically, if you are a platform with user data, you can probably earn $50 to $200 million for it, selling it for AI training. And because of this, the companies that have that data have actually realized, hey, if I want to charge money for this, I should make it as hard as possible for other people to access, right? So Stack Overflow and Reddit actually changed their API terms to make it harder for people to access their data, which gives them basically better pricing power in charging money for data. One group, though, still has access to their data, which is users. A lot of people don't realize that you legally own all of your data. So in the same way that when you park your car in a parking lot, the parking lot doesn't like own your car, right? You still own your car. When you put your data in a platform, you still legally own all of your data, right? So to give you a couple of examples, if you have an Alexa, you can go export every single recording Alexa has ever taken of you. If you have an Instagram account, this is actually good just exercise to do. You can request your data. They'll give you a zip file with everything. So it's like your messages, your posts, your photos, and it'll actually even include the AI-generated labels that they put on you for marketing purposes. One of the labels that they put on me is stressed but not depressed. And so it's just like interesting to go see. And it is legally your data, right? You can go and get that whenever you want. So there's kind of this opportunity, like can you have 100 million users export their platform data to create a user-owned foundation model? So users have a lot of data. If you have 100 million users contributing data exports from 5 platforms, you have 30 times more data than leading training data sets. And if properly incentivized, users can create even more data. I think we're already starting to see this with people who are using tools like Rewind and other things to collect more data so they can use it with AI. But if you have this incentive, you can create very, very large data sets that are, I'll mention too, like quality matters just as much as quantity, right? So you need quantity and quality. There's really a lot of data. Users also have a lot of compute. This actually calculation changed my mind on some of the distributed compute stuff. I used to be very skeptical because usually AI models are trained in a data center where all the GPUs are co-located. And my view was like, hey, it's going to be way less efficient to train models if the GPUs are far apart. But if you look at the numbers, the compute used to train GPT-4 versus Ethereum miners combined compute, like in the proof of work days, they have like 50 times as much compute, right? So even if you take a 10x hit, you still have a huge amount of compute. There are some open resource search questions to make this possible. So asynchronous training needs to work, and other sort of research problems that other people are pushing forward. Once you have those model weights, you can have collective governance and ownership, right? So users get paid when the model is used, or even paid proportionally to how much they taught the model. And then the collective can set usage rules as well. One thing I run into when using Claude from Anthropic is sometimes when I ask it for help with a crypto project, it tells me, like, I can't help you because crypto is unethical, and I don't want to support some kind of crypto scheme. And I think that, like, it's just someone needs to decide censorship when you have these different models. Our view at Vana is that it should be kind of decided by the collective of everyone who's contributed to that AI model. So in summary, I think a lot of people assume that foundation models have to be a monopoly because there's a huge amount of capital expenditure that's required to train them, right? And the approach today that AI people have is, okay, let's hope that Meta keeps on open sourcing their next models, right? But actually, users as a whole have enough data and enough compute to actually train a better model than any of the models out there today. So now, kind of getting into Vana, what we're doing is building user-owned AI through user-owned data. Some of the 2 key concepts with Vana are 1, non-custodial data, which allows you to manage access to your data just like your funds, and 2, proof of contribution. What that allows us to do is basically all pool our data together into a data DAO and ensure quality, right? So if all of us in this room like put our Telegram messages or emails or something into a pool together, someone malicious could say, hey, I'm going to pretend to be 100 people and contribute a bunch of bad data. What proof of contribution does is kind of ensures the data quality coming into each data DAO. The Reddit data DAO is one of the big projects on the network, and they saw 140,000 real Reddit users join in a week. I think this is really impressive because it consisted of both non-crypto users and crypto users. So 1, there were around 1 million people who tried to join. only 140,000 people passed proof of contribution. Basically, they need to have like a real Reddit account with sufficient karma. It's been around for long enough. And there was kind of this dynamic where, so with Vana, each data DAO has their own dataset specific token. Vana mainnet is not yet live. The Reddit data DAO is the only dataset specific token that's live right now. But what they did is basically the crypto native folks were participating, speculating on this token, and then just normal Reddit users who had a lot of karma could get like $400 for their data. And so then those normal users with a lot of good data came in, contributed data into that data pool, and now they have a really strong data set that they've actually used to train the first user-owned AI model. Because the AI model is just trained on Reddit data, it's just good at shitposting. But I think it will go down in history as like the first user-owned AI model, although just shitposting. So now there are a bunch of different data DAOs on Vana, which are pooling data for AI training. I'll call out a few. So Volara is the Twitter data DAO. They're pooling Twitter data. The LinkedIn data DAO, they actually just raised their first funding, first venture-backed project on Vana. There is also a new 23andMe data DAO, which is actually trying to buy 23andMe, the company. It only has like a $100 to $200 million market cap. And so, yeah, actually I gave a talk earlier this week about, this, and then some guy was like, I want to start a 23andMe one, and it has like, it's in the works. So if you want to contribute there, let me know. Let me see if there's anything else to add here. Yeah, each data DAO has its own token. And people are really kind of like building businesses around this. So we aggregate data demand from, my co-founder used to work in Web2 data sales, selling data to big tech and different AI companies. So we've brought a lot of the data DAOs, their first data buyers, and can help you also understand, hey, what data sets are valuable to start today. A few that aren't in the works yet, but I'd love to see, are audio data sets and video data sets for kind of like multimodal models. A little bit about the Vana architecture. So there's the data liquidity layer, which is where all the different data DAOs live. You can deploy a data DAO permissionlessly to our testnet. The top 16 data DAOs actually earn a share of emissions, which is kind of similar to like BitTensor's subnet architecture. And then there is the sort of like Connectome. That's just like a ledger that's a record of all the data transactions. It is an EVM-compatible L1, which is optimized for private data. And then you have this data portability layer, where if you've connected your data through a data DAO, you can then use it throughout different applications, right? So if I join the Twitter data DAO, connecting my Twitter data, I can log into Farcaster, have all my tweets and all my followers there with me. It's mostly consumer AI apps that are built on the data portability layer today. If you want to get involved with user-owned AI, many different ways to do it. If you're a builder, start a data DAO or like connect the data DAO somehow to your project. If you're a protocol and you want access to user-owned data, like there's an agents protocol, Talus, that's kind of using the data to personalize the agents more. Many different use cases for the data. There's actually an AI company now that's doing full model pre-training on some of the data. So yeah, today mostly things are just fine-tuned. It's not true like training a foundation model from base, but now there's actually one of those starting. And then if you want to participate in a data pre-mine, so Vana mainnet is not yet live, but you can basically register your data, show that you have an account, and sort of like register early. But yeah, happy to take questions.
So which blockchain is Vana built on?
Vana is its own layer 1 blockchain, which is designed for private data. And I can actually cover some of that too, where I think that often it's like, hey, do we really need another chain in the world, right? And so we actually initially were like, okay, how do we deploy this from like just a contracts perspective? What we were seeing is then the data DAOs were deployed on different chains. The problem is it's way more valuable to sell data when different data DAOs can collaborate together. So to give you an example, there's like a Fortune 500 fashion company that we work with who buys data for $25 a user for people's fashion data plus Spotify data. If you were just selling Spotify data, that's worth like 10 cents. But because you combine them together from two different data sources, it's much more valuable, right? So you want all the data DAOs on the same chain somewhere, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean you need an L1, right? So then, okay, could you just start an L2 or something like that? The problem is that L2s today just run as like centralized sequencers. Vana is entirely designed to process private personal data, which is very regulated. So if you have that centralized sequencer, it's actually regulated as a data processor under GDPR, which means you need to give people the right to delete, which is very hard to do in a blockchain context. And so you need pretty aggressive decentralization of the nodes that are storing the state of all the different data transactions. So that's how we got to the L1.
Okay, understood.
It seems like most of the questions are around privacy today, but can you go a little bit deeper on what happens if I submit my data to the DAO? How is this data processed? How is it private? And once it is sold, is there any guarantees that this data is just not now lost into the internet and can be bought in a secondary market, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We call it internally like the double spend problem for data, right? Where like if I sell you my data, like if you take a copy of it, I've just lost that entire value, right? And I think it's really important to the system, not just from a privacy perspective of like, I don't want my data shared, but actually from an economic perspective. Like in order to charge someone money for something, it needs to stay private. And so with Vana, we have kind of this distinction between renting your data and selling your data. So I'll actually walk through the case of the Reddit data DAO. So after they collected the data set, there was like a Google Brain machine learning engineer who was like, hey, I want to train something on this data. He first needed to see some of the underlying data directly. So he put up a proposal to the DAO to get access to 10% of the data. They approved that, and he looked at it directly and was like, hey, I think that, honestly, the only thing I could train is like a shitposting model, but I think it'll work. So then he wrote the code to train the shitposting model, and that is when he rented the data, where he basically he never saw the full underlying data. He just deployed the code to train the model, and then only the weights can leave. And so that's kind of the difference between like renting data and selling data. I wish I had a diagram to walk you through the exact data flow. I can send you a link to it in the Vana docs, but I can talk through it super briefly. So when I join a data DAO, what I do is I take a copy of my data, I encrypt it with a key that I control, and I store it in my personal server. A personal server is actually a concept pioneered by Solid project and Urbit. Solid is started by Tim Berners-Lee, who's like the creator of the internet. And what it does is it basically unbundles where you store your data and the application. Usually an application stores all their users' data. In a personal server context, your data lives in your personal server, and you grant an application access to it. So what you do is you can host it in like Google Drive, Dropbox. You can even run it from your MacBook. That's where your data lives. And then you commit it to a data DAO. You have to grant access to the data DAO to basically prove in some way that your data meets the proof of contribution and is kind of sufficiently valuable. Most of them today rely on trusted execution environments to do that, which is basically just checking quality of the data. And then some of them store a copy of your data in escrow if they reward you up front. And in that case, you encrypt a copy of your data with a key that the DAO controls. And they only decrypt your data if the DAO votes and kind of runs the approved code. Or you are not rewarded up front. You're only rewarded when the data is used. And then it can just stay in your personal server, and someone access it from there. So yeah, it's kind of like a classic federated system. Like, so actually, Solid Project and Urbit were built on their shoulders. They were super early and did a great job in the space.
Yeah, bringing this up because you said something with respect to deletion in a crow processor in a centralized sequencer. The right to be forgotten is a fundamental human right, but immutability is a first principle feature of blockchain. So do we change our attitude towards fundamental human rights, or do we change how blockchains behave, or how are you guys building around it?
That is a very deep ideological question that I cannot answer for like an industry as a whole. I think that sort of like the guiding principle is in the same way that what crypto has done for funds is like made it non-custodial, right? You control the keys and you decide, you have full autonomy over that. I think doing the same thing for your data, right? And so if you want to delete your data that's in your personal server environment, you can delete it, and kind of trying to get as close to that as possible. But yeah, I mean, like very deep ideological question. Maybe one note on that too is I think that a lot of the discussion today around decentralized AI is very ideological of like, hey, the control shouldn't be centralized because like that's what we believe is right. But that rarely drives product adoption, right? Like users do not use a product because they're like, oh, like I agree with the ideology. They use it because it lets them do something that they couldn't do before. And I think that that's really important actually with data DAOs on Vana. Sort of like you probably didn't even know you legally owned your LinkedIn or your Reddit data. You can now do something net new, and AI researchers can now access data that they wouldn't otherwise be able to access.
I have a question about the Instagram data. So you mentioned before that you can upload your Instagram data and export it to your DAO. So how do you solve for credit card information, passport information, names, locations, political views, all that? Basically, that data is uncurated. So do you solve any of those issues? Do you delete any of information, or how does that work?
Yeah, so ultimately that's up to the data DAO. So some of them are redacting certain information. Like with a Reddit export, it actually includes your IP logs, and they just redact that and don't include that. And so, yeah, that's ultimately up to the data DAO. So I'd say the different data DAO founders kind of think through that. And they also handle all the different data structuring. And then usually when a machine learning engineer is training a model, they like to do their own pre-processing. They kind of want like the rawest form of the data, and then they do the cleaning, et cetera, themselves.
So once this user-owned data concept becomes mainstream, do you see a change in business model where Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and all these companies are charging or earning revenue from the advertisement? Their business model would change as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So like in today's paradigm, like generally how things work is like you monetize user data, right? And I think that's actually why a lot of data ownership projects to date have failed, where they go to market and they're like, hey, developers, like build an app with user-owned data. And then the developer is like, wait, but like if I want to raise money to build my app, I need to like find some way to make, and we just live in a world where the reality is that's how a lot of business models work. And so, yes, I think that Vana has the power to like really shift that in an interesting way, especially when there's a lot of economic value that gets created from AI, right? And so I think one really tangible example is if you have an AI model that's like trained on all your data and this kind of, I picture like personal AI Anna, like AI Anna autonomous agent. Like I want full ownership over her and to kind of like earn as she's used and just to have that full autonomy. So yeah.
For the time, I think probably just take one more question.
Just a question on like, would the data DAO concept kind of work for traditional publishers? So if you're like New York Times or someone, can you just upload your data set over there? Is that something you see?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's sort of like for companies that already own their data, would we work with them? What we've found is that offering them a crypto-based solution is not as 0 to 1. It is sort of like if they want to sell their data, they can probably do it in like a Web 2 way. Whereas with Vana, the real unlock is like, hey, users didn't even know they own this data. And it's much more like 0 to 1. Reddit actually tried to shut down the Reddit data DAO around when it hit 100,000 users, but it was able to stay up because of non-custodial data. And it really is a very, like, it's a very different thing. So yeah, our core focus is actually on having users take data out, but there are a couple data DAOs that are building where different businesses have their users contribute their data. So there are a few cases like that. If you have more questions, feel free to DM me on Twitter. I'm quick to answer, or just come talk to me. I appreciate all the questions.